Welcome to the ReReview podcast, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin. We have an immense love for the films of our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we are discussing Darkman, released in 1990, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Liam Neeson, Frances McDormand, and Colin Friels. This movie tells a revenge story of a man left for dead. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 31-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. This was Bobby's choice, so he'll open up our discussion this week. Bobby, tell us how you felt about Darkman.
Yeah, so I chose Darkman because I watched it when I was, pretty young, and I rented it and watched it on home video. And I remember when I was a kid just liking the movie a whole lot and not having seen it since then. So let's say I don't want to date myself too much, but let's say at least like a 20-year gap.
It's a pretty big gap.
and And so, yeah, it could be bigger, but, somewhere along there, and I thought, "Alright, let's just revise this because, hey, it's got Sam Raimi, and he did Spider-Man, and he's gonna do the new Doctor Strange movie, and I think that Liam Neeson is really good, I think Frances McDormand is really good." So, yeah, so watching it again, I definitely had a different outlook coming through, but I want to just touch on some of the things that I really did enjoy. Basically 1990 was, especially this movie, like with superhero movies just starting up again with Batman, the 1989 Michael Keaton Batman coming. There was a lot of this movie that it had to have been it's somehow influenced by that movie because in my mind there were a fair amount of similarities. This movie is it's the trailer says that it was a superhero movie, but I think it differs from that quite a bit. There's a lot of other things going on with it, but it's certainly a very stylized movie. There's a lot of high speed zooms, quick dollies, like a lot of very stylized fisheye lenses and camera movement. And it is, I don't know if it's the heyday of physical effects with a lot of really cool makeup effects and even special effects back in the photochemical era where it's much more difficult to do a lot of interesting split screen type stuff. So there's a lot going on in this movie. One of the scenes that really sticks out to me right away is the very end where there's a helicopter chase, and it looks like they actually flew a couple of helicopters at pretty low altitude with the guy hanging on a rope downtown LA, which is like I'm sure it must not be logistically easy to do that kind of thing. And so that was a pretty amazing to see that when nowadays they probably just do it in front of the a volume or not even put on the table that they're going to do that in real life. And a lot of very interesting makeup effects and a whole lot of just physical special effects. But yeah, the movie is it was quite something to see. Very very stylized, very interesting. So
Are
I'm
you
going
are you
going
leading
to
are you leading the witness? Wait, what's stylized? Okay. All right.
I want to start a conversation here. So Austin, I'm gonna pass it off to you for your comments.
Stylized is a great word to single out or to describe this film because another word that I would go along with is abysmal. Painful, maybe. Yeah, definitely stylized, but it hurt in not the good ways that I sometimes want. And again, we're looking back on these things and seeing how they stand out for us today. And yeah, 1990 was a different time. but I couldn't find myself caring about the characters, the story that they presented of having a girlfriend who found out some issue with a realtor and things go wrong. They essentially want to get her, but he's the one who got Scott, and now he just wants to kill everyone. Okay, whatever. And just his motivation of not wanting to be called a freak, driving this intense anger and need to kill. Um, uh,
It was
I
like the
get
Back to the Future, like, "Are you a chicken?" Like
it
like
totally was that. It is so focused on that particular item. And I think when you say stylized, I could say it was comical, and in a way that it clearly was intended, but I didn't enjoy it. So I think of his I'm angry scenes, these scenes where they gave him the little flashback into his synapses that are crackling in his head because you're trying to get insight into this is a man who's going a little crazy, and and then just the music that would play and the flashing lights and the lack of the epilepsy warning that was probably needed as the seizure that I was having kicked in because I couldn't handle it because those things would come in and they'd be disjointed and you jump right back to the film and you just kind of say what's going on and I can't unfortunately can't compare some other films of the time to think of how green screen effects might have been going, but this one hurt. Like I feel like I could trace the outline of the pop out of every single person who was standing in front of either a green screen or a blue screen, whatever they were using at that time to do their effects. It was not pleasant to look at. So when I think of the best thing of this film, it was me being impressed that a stunt person was hanging from a wire underneath a helicopter flying through downtown LA. That is the thing that I said, oh, wow, this is actually cool. But prosthetic machine gun, nunchuck wielding, battling, nonsensical dialogue. Oh, I was beaten down by the time this film was over. I'm actually surprised I got it through. This is one where if I saw it in the theater today, I would have walked out. Definitely would have walked out. Not something that I was happy to watch. Oh, but I think I told you how I felt about it now. Matt, let me throw it to you. Tell us how you feel.
I definitely feel like I'm in the middle between these two points of view. Um, I do appreciate the style. It's a very Sam Raimi movie, and as a fan of his earlier works, I mean, with the Evil Dead series, Army of Darkness is definitely one of my favorites growing up. You can definitely see the Spider-Man franchise in a lot of the shots from the way that Sam Raimi, directed the movie and the way that Bill Pope shot the movie. You can definitely see the thread that has gone through the decades, and I do appreciate it. It's a very unique point, way of making movies, um, and I think that if the genre meshes well with it, I think it works. Um, or at the very least, if the way that it's shot is specific to that what's happening in that particular scene, I think it's fine. I'm just remembering the intro sequence when the two gangs are clashing in the warehouse, and I think it's like 3 or 4 zooms that happens on what was his name, Durant, for some reason when it's going back and forth between him and the other leader of a gang or whatever, and so you're just getting these zooms, and it just doesn't make any sense. But there are some sequences where I feel like it stylistically does work for it, but there is no good acting in this movie, which is weird considering the star power that's in this movie. Um, I don't know if the intention was to be funny. Um, Scenes that I mean, the pink elephant sequence alone, you kind of get the feeling that it's supposed to be serious, but I couldn't stop laughing. I can only imagine what it would have been like if I was drunk watching it. I'm sure I would have been in tears. Um, so I don't know what the intent was. It's so hard to tell. It's one of those, you know, I definitely know that in recent years it's kind of fallen into that cult category, with Rocky Horror Picture Show and The Room and a few others where, it's so bad that it's good, level of movie watching. But it doesn't hold up to me. Um, did I enjoy it? Yeah, but probably not for the reason that the, director, writer, and all the actors probably intended. I will say that the thing that probably hurt it the most was it trying to be a superhero movie, which is weird because it starts off that way. Like, I know that Sam Raimi really wanted to do a Shadow movie or a Batman movie and try to get the rights for it and couldn't get the rights for it. So he just decided to make his own superhero movie. But then very much splashed in, Phantom of the Opera and The Elephant Man and, Universal horror movies into it. And I just don't know if those two things really meshed very well. Like, I get why, but it just didn't really work. And I don't know if it was just, that isn't a good combination or that it just wasn't, performed very well in this one case. Like, maybe there was something there that it could have turned out well, but just wasn't executed to its fullest potential.
I mean, what's
Do you think?
interesting is I feel like there is potential there, but I mean, the one thing that just sticks out to me is just the stylization of it. It's hard to get past some of that, like the story, all that kind of stuff. Just overwhelms. Like you were talking to Austin with the synapses and all that kind of stuff. That just kind of to me just overwhelms all of the other story, but I do think there's actually an interesting story idea in there. I mean, it's basically like it's similar to like, like the Man of a Thousand Faces or like the Saint type of situation where the guy has like a perfect mask system where he could just wear a mask and just hide as a crowd and to be any other person he needs to be, although he has like a time limit before the perfect mask situation melts away. But I do think that there's a pretty interesting story idea in there to move along. I mean, obviously there was other Darkman movies that I didn't see, like other direct to DVD sequels that maybe explored these ideas more thoroughly. But I do think there's story in there, just in terms of how okay, like he can. I mean, if he could hold his like his psychology together, like and not go crazy and not be so worried about being called a freak, I think that there's something in there in terms of just like being able to hide as another person. And there's that fantasy of being like whoever you want to be whenever and just like disappear into, especially if you're like disfigured and you can't go out in public or whatever, like just to be able to hide as another person seems to be like a story there, even though in many cases it's probably like a story that goes down a dark path, like no pun intended.
It was fully intended.
It was kind
Without
of.
question, it was fully intended. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, but again, this is. I feel like that's the 1990 part of you talking there, and not the 2021 you who's saying, is this a story you're interested in today?
I mean, I think it could be told today. I mean, I think it would be a lot different than the story that we got in this movie. Like I said, the stylization was pretty like, brought to the forefront in this movie. But I think imagine if you don't have any of that, and if you just have a guy who's disfigured but has an ability to have a mask, I think that you can go many different ways with that kind of situation.
So back to Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
Well,
I,
I
yeah,
will
I
say
feel like
though,
I'm challenged a little bit just in terms of you're right. You didn't watch a 2 and a 3, and I'll let you go here in a second, Matt. But just thinking about it, did what we watched even warrant a 2 and a 3? Could there have been sequels to this film?
I I mean, watching it now, I don't think so, but clearly there must have been. There must have been some sort of demand back then. I don't know when the sequels were released. I imagine relatively quickly after this one came out, but there must have been some sort of demand, or maybe it was just not too different than the superhero rush now, where They were just trying to ride out the wave while they could. Because realistically, that it didn't last that long when you really think about it. We basically had Batman in '89. Returns came out in what, 91, 92 for Batman Returns.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the end of, because we had a couple. We did have The Shadow came out, The Phantom came out, this came out. I feel like there was a couple other smaller ones. I suppose Ninja Turtles was kind of out. I don't know if you want to consider that superhero movies, but it kind of has that same kind of vibe as a superhero movie. So I kind of feel like the area was obviously a lot smaller as far as from like '89 to, let's say, like '94, '95. And then it kind of died off again until Spider-Man came out in 2001. So I don't know. Looking back at it now, I don't think there was much of a story to really warrant it. Like, I personally, I don't think that there's a story here that could be told in today's day and age, at least as it's being presented, the core elements here. Maybe if you took a few tidbits and kind of rearranged it and did some new stuff with it, I don't think the revenge story works nearly as well. The face mask thing, I think, is kind of would have to be revived or, maybe re-looked at from a different point of view for it to work, because I kind of feel like, I don't know. Actually, I was about to say it doesn't really work, but they do it in Mission Impossible all the freaking time. So
yeah, I was just thinking Mission Impossible too. Yeah,
I was saying, like, no one would sit there and believe that this guy can literally change his bone structure by putting on a mask, but Tom Cruise does it all the time. So I guess maybe I can't say anything about that. I don't know. Like, I guess the question would be like, could we see a Netflix or a Amazon Darkman revival? Maybe a limited series, 8, 9 episodes, and really flesh out the characters, a lot better. And I definitely feel like maybe the reason why he becomes Darkman could be changed. I feel like essentially him getting caught in the crossfire doesn't really do much for his reasoning. Like, maybe if I can't remember what her character's name was, McDormand's character had died during the explosion, and so his revenge wasn't so much about his disfigurement, but more about her murder. But maybe it just became the Crow all of a sudden, you know. But I don't know. Maybe it could work if you change some key elements there, and I wouldn't want to see this as another movie. I definitely wouldn't want to see it as a movie. It'd have to be something a little bit more long form, but not. I don't want to see like a CW Darkman. I'd much rather something along the lines of Netflix, where they're allowed to go more into violence, darker themes, and stuff like that, and it remain all pun intended dark.
You piqued my interest with CW Darkman. They probably already have that show in the works.
Oh no!
It's probably already in the works. It's gonna be young hot people. This is going a bad way. So yeah, okay. I accept all that. I think I agree with you there, Matt. It's the idea of bringing it back, maybe deep diving into something a bit more, giving him a motivation that is beyond, being caught in the crossfire, beyond you did damage to me, so now I want to mess everyone up, and the drive of, if they did actually kill her, and therefore he is doing XYZ. I like that, actually. It's basic, but it's serviceable.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of the problem too. Is that's core level. Almost to the point. Not, it's even beyond cliche, right? Like, maybe if it was something like, because in this story she finds out information which leads to her getting killed or whatever. Maybe if it was more along the lines of he did something to cause the events to occur. So it's revenge, but it's also guilt, right? He caused the problem. I know in this one he's a scientist. Maybe they can kind of alter it a little bit. Maybe like it being about real estate's stupid. Let's not have Darkman be about real estate. That's just not, that just doesn't work. I don't even know if it worked back in the 90s. Like, was real estate that hot of a commodity that they start murdering people and have gang wars over real estate? What was LA? What was LA back in 1990?
Yeah, it's almost like they wanted to have like a Bond villain, like a cat petting type of like corporate type of villain to the scale of what this movie was.
I actually, thinking back on it now, I might be digging a little bit too deep into this movie that I'm not the biggest fan of. I think it really hurt this movie, the fact there was essentially two villains. That you had Durant and then corporate sleazeball guy whose name I can't even remember. Having those two bad guys, I think, really hurt this movie, because I remember Durant and I remember there was the corporate bad guy, but can't remember his name. I remember he was kind of sleazy. He was trying to hit on McDormand's character, but I think having the two villains kind of hurt it, especially in the last act.
Oh, the nail gun act?
Yeah, I mean, that was fine, but I mean, there wasn't really any, the whole Durant was really the driving force for a majority of it.
I think you're going to love the sequel then. It is titled Darkman 2, The Return of Durant.
I mean, did they just copy Return of Jafar and he just...
Well, if I'm not mistaken, he died in a fiery crash. So now you've got maybe two Darkmans running around in the second Darkman. So
it's this RoboCop 2.
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, okay. So again, back to our core thing. We're 31 years on. Bobby, are you putting this? Are you grabbing the VHS that you saved because you bought Darkman back in 1990? Are you taking it out, putting it in, and watching this movie again?
I think that watching it again for one time, this first time, to see it again and have the experience of watching it again, fulfilled my desire to watch this movie, and I do not have any other desire to continue to watch it again. So, I mean, I'd love to hear more about how it was made and all that kind of stuff, but actually watching the actual movie is in the past for me now.
Oh, that's a very, very nice way of putting that. How about for you, Matt?
Yeah, I'm done. I the fact that I made it through, what was this, 90 minutes, whatever the runtime was, the fact that I made it through this time is borderline a miracle. So I would why would I do that to myself ever again?
In my mind, it gets extra points for only being 96 minutes long, or however long it was.
That's 90 minutes too long.
It is a very short film. I think we're landing on this space of not necessarily recommending that you watch this, but if you do, you definitely know what you're getting into at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of Sam Raimi, of Evil Dead, of his kind of stuff, then, I mean, I think it's worth a watch. It's certainly like the same kind of thing where you'll see some of the same people. Bruce Campbell has a great cameo. You definitely see Ted Raimi, Sam Raimi's brother. So all that kind of stuff is fun to see. And you definitely see the characteristics of Raimi movies, and you say, oh, yeah, okay, like, I can see this in some of the other movies like we mentioned. So I think if you're a huge fan of Sam Raimi, I think it's worth at least seeing what he's done.
One time if you've never seen it before.
Correct.
Let's just make that clarification there. All right, well, with that said, again, check it out if you want to hurt a little bit, but there's still something there you might enjoy. As always, thank you so much for listening to the ReReview podcast. We'll see you next time.